Last night, at an intimate industry gathering in Los Angeles, Robert Duvall, one of cinema's most respected veterans, delivered a searing verdict on the state of Hollywood that sent shockwaves through every corner of Tinseltown. With decades of iconic performances behind him, from the brooding Tom Hagen in the Godfather trilogy to the weathered Colonel Dobbins in Apocalypse Now, Duvall stood on stage and declared that American film is unraveling faster than anyone dares to admit. His voice, gravelly with years of insight, carried a simple but devastating message: we're tearing our own house down. For 50 years, Duvall has navigated the shifting tides of Hollywood, working within its studio system, surviving meteoric rises, and watching, with keen awareness, as independent voices have been swallowed by corporate machines. He's seen new Hollywood directors challenge old guards, witnessed the blockbuster revolution reshape storytelling, and applauded the rise of auteurs who refused to compromise their vision. Tonight, however, he lamented a fundamental collapse of the very ecosystem that once championed risk, creativity, and the human spirit. He pointed to the streaming gold rush, where massive budgets for big-name franchises have strangled mid-budget films before they can breathe. Gone are the days when studios released intimate dramas, offbeat comedies, and quiet character studies alongside tentpole spectacles. Instead, every greenlight has become a high-stakes gamble on brand recognition. Directors and actors shape their careers around 5 to 10-minute social media teasers, while executive boards chase subscriber counts instead of audience engagement. According to Duvall, that has killed nuance. 2 decades ago, he recalled, you could make a film for $20 million that might not set the box office ablaze, but would leave an imprint on audiences. Today, that same project gets lost in the algorithm. The disappearance of mid-budget films has a domino effect. Screenwriters lose outlets for original stories, emerging talent stagnates, and theaters fill with poster sequels and recycled superhero origin tales. Duvall warns that once originality goes extinct, revival becomes impossible. He also addressed the unchecked rise of digital effects and AI-driven shortcuts. Studios now allocate half of their budgets to CGI, stacking visual spectacle on spectacle. Actors record in sound stages with green screens, delivering dialogue to empty air, and increasingly, AI can replicate their faces and voices at a fraction of the cost. When machines start replacing humanity, Duvall argued, we lose the very thing that makes film art. He predicted a future where performers are optional and audiences crave raw authenticity more than any simulated heroics. The veteran actor condemned the runaway escalation of salaries for A-list stars and directors, deals structured like Wall Street investments, while entry-level craftsmen and crew face stagnant wages. He noted that the current Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA strikes reflect deeper unrest. A generation of storytellers tired of one-sided profit-sharing and residual structures that undervalue creative contributions. Duvall's blunt assessment: you cannot plunder the labor pool and expect art to flourish. Beyond economics, Duvall criticized the industry's obsession with diversity tick boxes and hyper-cautious marketing. Studios now assemble inclusion writers and focus group every word before scripts are locked. While representation remains crucial, he warned against tokenism that flattens characters into marketing assets. We must protect the artist's freedom to tell honest stories, he insisted, not manufacture social commentaries to satisfy algorithms or PR agendas. He concluded by urging a return to craft, support for independent producers, incentives for mid-range budgets, and preservation of theatrical distribution models. He proposed tax credits for character-driven features and anchor screenplay programs in underutilized cinemas. His final plea was both hopeful and urgent. If we do not act, future generations will only know cinema as an empty echo chamber of licensed properties. Over the next segments, we will unpack each of these crises: financial, technological, social, and explore how Duvall's own career offers a blueprint for survival. We'll hear from upstart directors, veteran craftspeople, and studio insiders who agree Hollywood is at a crossroads. Stay with us as we dive deep into the forces pulling Hollywood apart and the solutions that could rebuild it before Robert Duvall's prophecy becomes an irreversible reality. The streaming revolution began as a promise of endless choice and creative freedom, but in practice it has morphed into a tyranny of data and algorithms that crush mid-budget cinema. Today's major platforms allocate billions to franchise tentpoles, superhero sagas, sci-fi epics, reality TV spin-offs, and use predictive analytics to greenlight only projects with proven brand recognition. Original dramas, character-driven comedies, and risky auteur experiments have all but vanished from release schedules. Executives argue that every dollar invested in a standalone romance or nuanced thriller represents a gamble too large to justify. The result? A vacuum where emerging storytellers lose the chance to hone their craft and established filmmakers find themselves pigeonholed into expanding existing universes rather than inventing new ones. The mid-budget films once thrived in that creative sweet spot between indie art houses and blockbuster spectacles. Pictures like Juno, The Grand Budapest Hotel, and The Social Network reached audiences with budgets under $50 million, telling intimate stories that resonated deeply and often returned 5 or 10-fold on investment. Studios relied on that healthy ecosystem to nurture fresh voices and diversify their slates. Now, those titles are rarities. When a streaming service announces a mid-range drama, the press treats it like a unicorn sighting, analyzing viewership data to the decimal. If the opening weekend numbers aren't astronomical, the show is buried in the interface, effectively forgotten before word of mouth can even ripple. Writers have felt the pinch most acutely. With fewer outlets for original scripts, they confront a harsh calculus: adapt existing IP or watch their spec screenplays gather dust. Recent WGA negotiations centered on residuals for streaming content, an urgent fight because today's creators see little long-term return from their work. Residual checks that once sustained writers during lulls in production have dwindled, eroding the financial stability that has historically empowered artists to take risks. As Duvall warned, this slow erosion of mid-level budgets threatens to bankrupt the very pipeline that feeds Hollywood's creative furnace. Actors, too, face narrowing pathways. A generation ago, a steady character actor might leap from indie breakout to supporting roles in prestige pictures. Now those roles exist mostly in ensemble prestige television, where union scales compete with sky-high expectations for extra hours. As A-list stars command tens of millions per film, smaller performers must scrape by on indie series stipends or turn to voice work in video games. SAG-AFTRA's ongoing negotiations argue for fair compensation and streaming residuals, but without a robust pipeline of mid-budget projects, many actors fear that their careers will plateau prematurely or be forced into commercial pitches disconnected from their artistic ambitions. Behind the scenes, craftspeople are caught in the same collapse. Cinematographers, production designers, and costume artisans once built reputations through a mix of studio pictures and indie films. Today, those artisans must chase big-budget tentpoles, where their creative input is often overshadowed by corporate mandates, or struggle on micro-budgets that barely cover living expenses. Duvall highlighted this divide. When CPAs run development, artistry suffers, he said. Without a thriving middle market, the mentorship networks that train tomorrow's artisans erode, leaving fewer skilled professionals to sustain both spectacle and subtlety. The theater circuit feels the fallout as well. Art house cinemas have shuttered across the country, unable to compete with at-home streaming catalogs. Faced with rising real estate costs and shrinking audiences, independent theaters once specializing in mid-budget fare now either switch to retro screenings of classic titles or close their doors entirely. Community engagement, and the very cultural exchange that comes from watching a little-seen drama on a big screen, has faded. For Duvall, the disappearance of that communal experience portends a deeper loss. Cinema's magic lives in shared moments, he insisted. When we privatize every viewing, we lose the conversation. Some hopeful exceptions have arisen. Subscription models like A24's streaming app and specialized distributors like Neon persist in championing mid-budget auteurs. A handful of theaters partner directly with these outfits to guarantee theatrical runs for select titles. But those windows grow narrower each year, hamstrung by logistical costs and the imperative for simultaneous streaming release. The pandemic accelerated this trend, rolling out day-and-date models that undercut box office returns and further discourage theaters from booking anything but established franchises. If the mid-budget collapse paints one half of Hollywood's crisis, the other is the unchecked dominance of data-driven content approval. Focus groups and algorithmic testing now shape every aspect of development, from casting choices to poster design. Studios A/B test color palettes and review audience responses in real time. Where once a passionate pitch could secure funding, now any narrative element that flops in test screenings can be re-edited or scrapped entirely before shooting. The courage to champion offbeat scripts has given way to the safer terrain of sequel after sequel, leaving little room for surprise or miscalculated risks that yield genuine innovation. That Duvall's call to action resonates, because he experienced Hollywood's golden mid-budget era firsthand. His own films outside the blockbuster mainstream, Tender Mercies, The Apostle, earned modest budgets but critical acclaim and enduring cultural impact. He recalled set stories of creative improvisation, where directors and actors collaborated freely, unshackled by the looming threat of instant cancellation. For Duvall, that era exemplified an ecosystem where artistry and commerce found equilibrium. Restoring that balance, he argues, requires reshaping financial incentives, reestablishing a healthy pipeline of mid-budget films, and recalibrating the industry's appetite for speculative data over human insight. The most visible symptom of Hollywood's unraveling is the runaway escalation of digital effects, where spectacle has become both the bait and the trap. Studios now funnel as much as 60% of a $200 million budget into CGI, render farms humming day and night, armies of rotoscoping artists, and endless drafts of motion capture passes. The result: fewer resources for scripts, rehearsals, location shoots, and real stunts that once grounded characters in tangible drama. Robert Duvall calls it digital anesthesia, a numbing addiction to visual flash that leaves every story feeling interchangeable and soulless. VFX supervisors speak of shot inflation, where a single scene demands hundreds of layers of computer-generated rain, debris, and particle simulations instead of a single crane shot over a real desert. One veteran compositor describes battling for 10 frames of practical dust to sell authenticity, only to have executives veto live oil burn effects in favor of cost-layered digital particles. They say they want realism, then cut away the grit that costs $3,000 in favor of $1 million render farm, she laments. That tension between practical artistry and corporate safety nets has turned entire franchises into endless testbeds for the latest rendering engine, while screenwriters and set designers watch budgets shrink. Then there's the rise of AI-driven shortcuts. Studios experiment with deep-fake de-aging, synthetic dialogue replacements, and pre-visualization tools that promise to accelerate production by scripting entire background scenes. In one recent tentpole, background extras were replaced by AI-generated crowds waving in perfect unison, a budget line item saved, but at the cost of real human presence. Stunt coordinators worry they'll soon be obsolete, replaced by AI stunt doubles, able to composite risk-free wirework onto body doubles. It's efficient, but you lose the heartbeat of a real performer, says a second-unit director. You feel it when it's actual flesh doing the fall. The disquiet goes deeper. As studios lean on AI for quick fixes, guilds see a threat to editors, sound designers, and even screenwriters. Algorithms can now iterate script drafts or splice trailers in seconds, tools originally pitched as assistants that increasingly overtly displace human workers. The Writers Guild strike of recent years spotlighted this fear, amateurs and executives alike using AI script generators to polish or replace first drafts, eroding trust in original voices. When every line can be optimized by a machine, where does the writer fit? One Oscar-nominated screenwriter asked. Duvall echoes that anxiety. Machines aren't artists. You can't pour decades of experience into a neural network and call it soul. While CG has inflated blockbuster budgets, micro-budget indies face the opposite squeeze. No digital safety net, no machine learning relief, only practical constraints and the ingenuity to shoot on location. Filmmakers share war stories of scraping for fuel money for generator trucks, negotiating with bar owners to film for free, and stitching together green screen composites in a single MacBook Pro. Yet some find freedom in constraint. Indie dramas shot in real diners after hours possess a texture that no virtual set can replicate. One Duvall collaborator, producer Helen Plummer, argues that this back-to-basics spirit is Hollywood's last hope for rediscovering raw storytelling. When you can't buy 5,000 VFX shots, you have to mine the characters for drama, she says. Contrast framing deepens the irony. Franchise films boast eye-watering photoreal dragons circling CGI cities, yet struggle to depict a simple conversation in a car without unnatural pacing or awkward cinematography. Virtual backlots replace bustling streets. Remote crews shoot with volumetric LED stages, and actors perform opposite empty screens. The glossy results are undeniably impressive, but critics note a growing fatigue. Audiences yearn for texture, spontaneity, and real atmospheres. Box office boomerangs like the recent reboot of a beloved sci-fi series lost half their audience after opening weekend, as word spread that even the CG looked tired. Emerging directors point to pioneering VFX-lean indies, films that gross millions on single-digit budgets, to argue for rebalancing practical and digital. They cite how the Blair Witch Project spawned visceral fear with nothing more than a shaky cam and natural woods, and how the original Jaws created suspense by suggestion, not every toothy detail. Duvall's own career underscores this lesson. Roles in Tender Mercies and The Apostle depended on dusty churches, live performances, and character-driven moments that no pixel could replace. He insists Hollywood must reclaim that ethos, reserving digital wizardry for enhancing, not dominating, the narrative. If artificial spectacle has anesthetized the senses, the antidote lies in recalibrating budgets, investing in real sets and genuine stunts, and treating AI as a supportive tool rather than a replacement for human craft. Duvall challenges studio heads to fund smaller productions alongside their tentpoles, to mandate a percentage of VFX budgets for practical augmentation, and to renegotiate labor agreements that protect the rights of every artisan, digital or analog. He warns that without this course correction, Hollywood risks trading its beating heart for a hollow chamber echoing only algorithms. The widening gulf between A-list paydays and crew wages has become impossible to ignore. While top actors and directors command nine-figure deals, complete with back-end percentages and lucrative first-look contracts, key craftspeople struggle under flat day rates and shrinking refunds. Duvall pointed out that on many tentpoles, the lead star's fee alone can exceed the combined payroll of an entire camera department for a month. Costume designers, sound mixers, and grips routinely receive no residuals on streaming reruns, the very engines that generate billions in viewership. Meanwhile, the same executives who bid astronomical prices for established names balk at modest raises for vital technical unions. The result is a demoralized workforce and an exodus of talented artisans who see no pathway to financial security. This imbalance fueled the recent Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA strikes, moments when the invisible backbone of Hollywood finally flexed its collective muscle. Writers walked out, demanding fair residual structures that reflect the streaming era's new economics. Actors refused roles that offered minimal residual compensation and broad studio rights. The twin strikes, Duvall observed, were not just labor disputes. They were existential alarms signaling that the industry's profit model was unsustainable. If we allow art to be exploited, he warned, we undermine the very foundation of storytelling. Behind closed doors, studio chiefs acknowledged that flat-fee buyouts and work-for-hire contracts had turned creative contributions into one-time expenses rather than ongoing partnerships. Beyond pay, Duvall chastised the tokenization of diversity. Inclusion riders and checklist mandates have proliferated, leading some studios to celebrate surface representation while neglecting deeper narrative agency. Films may boast ensemble casts with varied backgrounds, but too often, those characters serve as backdrop to the real protagonist, an echo of outdated casting practices in new wrapping paper. We can't reduce people to quotas, Duvall admonished. Authentic inclusion demands that every voice be heard, not just counted. He recounted auditions in which talented performers of color were steered towards stereotypical roles, while more complex parts remained off-limits. The heroics of on-screen diversity ring hollow if off-camera corridors remain closed to minority directors, writers, and department heads The same gathering. Duvall spotlighted the toxic influence of market research on storytelling. Test audiences now dissect scripts for demographic appeal, watering down creative risks and pressuring filmmakers to homogenize content. Studios commission diversity consultants to greenlight projects that look inclusive on a PowerPoint, while clinging to formulaic, broad appeal narratives. True diversity flourishes in risk, Duvall argued. When we trust storytellers to craft characters of depth and contradiction, not just checkboxes. He called for redevelopment of narrative pipelines so that underrepresented voices can pitch projects directly to decision-makers, free from corporate gatekeeping. His critique extended to the cultural impact of this homogenization. When every film feels calibrated to the center of the bell curve, in casting, in tone, in messaging, audiences grow numb. Gritty, culturally specific dramas, subversive comedies, and experimental formats are relegated to niche streaming hubs or sidelined completely. The result is a monoculture in which global tastes are approximated by focus group consensus rather than curiosity. Duvall warned that cinematic empathy, our ability to walk a mile in another life, dwindles when stories don't venture into unexplored human terrain. To reverse these trends, Duvall proposed concrete reforms. He urged legislatures to reintroduce scaled tax incentives, keyed not simply to production volume, but to budget tiers, ensuring mid-range films reap meaningful benefits. He called for a mandated creative profit share, in which writers' rooms, key department heads, and principal cast receive residual percentages tied to long-term performance. He advocated for a revival of studio backlots dedicated to testing new directors and crews on lower-cost projects, echoing the old Hollywood apprenticeship model that forged decades of craftsmanship. Crucially, he recommended expanding co-op financing structures, industry-wide funds seeded by tentpole profits, distributed as grants to diverse voices and independent producers. Duvall also urged unions to adapt. He encouraged the WGA and SAG-AFTRA to explore flexible membership tiers that support emerging artists through subsidized health benefits and training stipends, funded by top-earner levies. He championed a certified fair film seal of approval, awarded to productions meeting rigorous standards on pay equity, residual participation, and inclusive staffing. Such a program would signal to audiences and exhibitors that a film upholds ethical labor practices. Much like eco-certifications in the restaurant world as The Gathering closed, Duvall invited studio executives to witness a live demonstration of mid-budget set discipline. A short film shot in 48 hours for under $500,000, using local crews and underrepresented actors, yet boasting the emotional resonance of major features. The audience watched footage of sunlit exteriors, tense dialogue in tight living rooms, and a powerful performance by a non-union actor whose career the project had jump-started. When the lights came up, the message was clear: resourcefulness, empathy, and respect for talent can thrive even under financial constraints. Hollywood now stands at a crossroads. The streaming giants may fund endless sequels and CGI spectacles, but without addressing labor inequities, creative stagnation, and tokenism, the industry risks starvation at the middle. Duvall's call to rebuild, from fairer pay and genuine inclusion to restored mid-budget pipelines and union adaptability, offered a playbook for survival. As the crowd dispersed, one truth lingered. The fate of cinema lies not in algorithms or bottom-line spreadsheets, but in the hands and hearts of those who bring stories to life. In the wake of Duvall's challenge, pockets of resilience have begun to sprout throughout the industry, each offering a proof of concept for his proposals. Take, for example, the recent success of the indie powerhouse A24. Operating largely outside the tentpole machine, it has cultivated a slate of mid-budget titles: Moonlight, Lady Bird, Uncut Gems, each budgeted under $30 million, yet racking up critical acclaim, awards, and healthy returns. A24's model depends on lean crews, location shoots, and strong festival launches rather than massive global marketing campaigns. By reinvesting profits into emerging directors and writers, it embodies Duvall's call for a studio backlit alternative, one that prizes storytelling craft and smart financing over headline-grabbing effects. Similarly, Blumhouse Productions has proven that modest budgets need not equate to thin ambition. Specializing in horror and thriller genres, Blumhouse routinely produces films for $5 to $10 million that generate box office grosses in the tens or hundreds of millions. Their strategy relies on nimble shooting schedules, compact crews, and creative promotional partnerships. These hits, Get Out, The Invisible Man, The Black Phone, demonstrate that mid-budget projects can thrive when granted creative freedom paired with strategic distribution. Blumhouse's willingness to share back-end profit participation with key cast and crew also mirrors Duvall's creative profit share proposal, reinforcing that equitable deals need not hamper success. Film festivals, long guardians of auteur voices, are also recalibrating to champion mid-range cinema. Sundance has expanded its collaborative film program, providing matched grants and VOD agreements for select projects under $2 million. TIFF and Venice introduced sections spotlighting features financed through co-op structures and equity crowdsourcing, enabling creators to retain creative control while securing necessary funds. These festival pipelines serve as proving grounds for Duvall's apprenticeship model, linking upstart talents with seasoned mentors and connecting financiers directly to original scripts. Bypassing traditional gatekeepers at the grassroots level, new financing cooperatives are emerging. The Creative Collective Film Fund, seeded by voluntary levies from higher-earning productions, now supports quarterly grants to underrepresented filmmakers, channeling profits from blockbuster hits back into the ecosystem. These co-ops, managed democratically by guild representatives, embody Duvall's call for industry-wide funds. Early recipients are already turning funds into focused projects, domestic dramas, and character studies that would have struggled in today's data-driven climate. Their interim successes hint at a sustainable path to restore mid-budget diversity. Meanwhile, practical training hubs are opening on repurposed studio backlots. In Atlanta, the newly christened Duvall Studios Incubator offers 24 cubicles equipped for small crew shoots, editing bays, and art department workshops. Filmmakers with budgets under $5 million can secure subsidized rates on space and equipment, while participating in mentorship programs led by veteran cinematographers and sound designers. This aligns with Duvall's vision of preserving apprenticeship networks. Young artisans learn hands-on, building tangible resumes without the pressure of Goliath budgets. Exhibitors are pivoting, too. Independent theaters in Los Angeles and New York have banded together under the banner of Cinema Revive, programming weekly mid-budget features alongside Q&A events and community drives. Subscriptions models, a la the revived Movie Pass prototype, offer flat fees for unlimited art house shows, boosting attendance for films that might otherwise disappear after a single weekend. Patronage has grown by 20% in some markets, suggesting that audience appetite for non-franchise work endures when given accessible infrastructure. TO support crews. Union chapters have begun exploring tiered membership dues and supplemental training funds. The ITSE local council recently approved a pilot program in which a small percentage of blockbuster VFX budgets underwrites regional workshops in costume, lighting, and set construction. This initiative aims to reverse the artisan exodus Duvall decried by creating pathways for craftsmen to gain skills, land sustainable work, and pass knowledge to the next generation. Finally, policy advocates in California and Georgia have taken Duvall's tax incentive proposals to state legislatures. The Mid-Budget Film Act, under consideration in Sacramento, would raise state rebates for qualifying projects with budgets between $10 and $50 million, an attempt to balance blockbuster breaks with incentives for smaller productions. In Georgia, studios and local governments are negotiating similar frameworks, hoping to preserve the region's lucrative production economy beyond the tentpole cycle. These multifaceted responses illustrate Hollywood's early engagement with Duvall's blueprint. Independents, exhibitors, unions, and legislators are each planting seeds that could cultivate the mid-budget revival he championed. Yet sustaining this momentum demands continued collaboration. Blockbuster studios must agree to profit-share accords. Festivals need to guarantee theatrical windows. State governments must codify balanced incentives, and audiences must embrace risk-taking in theaters and on streaming platforms alike. Only by knitting together these efforts can Hollywood rebuild the ecosystem that nurtures true creativity, honors every craft, and ensures that cinema remains a place where fresh voices flourish. and where Robert Duvall's searing indictment becomes a catalyst for genuine, lasting renewal. Now that Robert Duvall's clarion call has echoed through studios and backlots alike, the task of rebuilding Hollywood rests on a coalition of artists, executives, legislators, and audiences. It demands more than nostalgia for a bygone era. It requires the collective will to enact policies and practices that privilege storytelling and craftsmanship over expediency. The path begins with steps: implementing tiered tax incentives for mid-budget features, adopting creative profit-sharing arrangements, and ensuring union partnerships that protect wages and benefits for every contributor. Only through sacrifice and advocacy can the industry restore a vibrant pipeline where fresh voices prosper and technical artisans refine their skills. Essential is rebalancing creative autonomy with data-driven decision-making. Development offices must reserve slots for untested concepts, champion scripts that define marketing metrics, and empower test screenings to inform, then dictate storytelling choices. Studio chiefs should complement algorithmic forecasts with veteran readers who scout projects for emotional depth and cultural nuance. When executives commit to risk as a driver of progress, the curation of mid-range titles will flourish, giving rise to films that resonate beyond focus group consensus. Legislative allies will play a critical role. Political leaders in California, Georgia, and beyond should codify Duvall's Mid-Budget Film Act and extend rebates to cover location shoots, crew training, and apprenticeship programs. By linking tax credits to hiring practices and profit-sharing provisions, policymakers can incentivize employment and nurture a diverse workforce. Public partnerships can fund training centers on repurposed set floors, bridging the gap between entry-level positions and seasoned craftsmanship. With this infrastructure in place, emerging filmmakers gain access to resources previously confined to blockbuster franchises. On the ground, guilds and labor unions must seize this moment to evolve. Establishing tiered membership models with sliding scale dues can welcome aspiring creatives while sustaining health and pension benefits. Negotiating residual structures tied to streaming performance will safeguard income streams and reinforce the value of original content. A certified fair production seal, endorsed by guild leadership, would guide audiences to support films that uphold these ethical labor standards, shifting consumer power toward responsible creators and producers. The resurgence of independent exhibitors marks another pillar of revitalization. Theaters organized under Cinema Revive have demonstrated that audiences crave discovery when presented with robust marketing and community engagement. Expanding subscription and membership models, hosting curated film series, and partnering with local arts organizations will bolster attendance and reinforce the ritual of shared viewership. Digital platforms, too, have a stake. Streaming services should introduce dedicated sections for original, mid-range productions, guaranteeing a minimum promotional budget and a fixed theatrical window before digital premiere. Creative residencies sponsored by tech giants can fund short films, pilot series, and experimental projects, with clear agreements on ownership and revenue sharing. By valuing originality as highly as franchise installments, platforms can cultivate brand loyalty and differentiate themselves through high-caliber content. Education institutions must align curricula with industry needs. Film schools and vocational programs can incorporate modules on hybrid workflows that blend production techniques with VFX and emerging technologies. Partnerships between universities, unions, and studios can offer apprenticeships and mentorship programs, ensuring that graduates step into roles with experience and professional networks. This fusion of academic instruction and real-world training will generate a workforce ready to navigate both analog and digital landscapes. Public discourse around these reforms should be transparent and sustained. Industry roundtables, live-stream town halls, and trade publications can provide platforms for sharing metrics, celebrating early successes, and refining strategies. Audiences should be invited into the conversation, learning how box office returns, streaming views, and cultural impact interplay. When the public understands that choices in ticket buying, subscriptions, and social media engagement carry real weight, collective behavior can drive demand for the mid-budget renaissance Duvall envisions. Ultimately, Robert Duvall's charge is not a lament, but an invitation. It's a summons to reimagine Hollywood as an ecosystem that honors both commerce and artistry, where profits and principles coexist. By committing to labor equity, creative risk, diversified financing, and communal viewing experiences, the film industry can chart a sustainable course for the coming decades. The challenge is formidable, but the stakes are higher. Preserving the alchemy that transforms scripts into cinematic magic and ensuring that future generations inherit not a hollow echo chamber, but a living, breathing realm of stories waiting to be told.